What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Welcome to another episode of Friends of Five. We got a great show for you lined up today where we're going to get into the X's and O's of the Celtics and the Heat game. But before that, just a quick reminder for everybody to get onto our YouTube page, subscribe to the page, turn on those notifications. Nobody has more info on the Heat than we do, and it's all free. You also want to make sure you follow us on our Twitter at Friends of Five with a 5 at the end. We also got lots of information, and make sure you go onto the page of FiveReasonSports.com. We got a lot of free content, a lot of good shirts. And with that, let's get on to the show. My name is Matthew Perdomo.
Yes, and I'm Ryan Lasner, LasnerSport. And we have a very special Coach Gibson. How you doing today, Coach?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
We're happy because the Miami Heat, they're up 2-1. And, I feel like, that wasn't anticipated. So, we're looking at a game 4 tomorrow. You've seen the X's and O's like SimbaofSports just said. How do you feel in this case, Miami adjusts for game 4? Do you think, does it look good for Miami?
Yeah, I think for the most part, the adjustment is kind of just play better than game 3. But, that's easier said than done because the Celtics did a good job of taking away what the strengths of game 1 and 2 were, which was the switchability of the Heat's defense. And, they clogged up the paint with the zone. So the Celtics response, obviously having Hayward back, now the Heat have to kind of decide how they're going to adjust moving forward. And they're obviously going to shoot probably a little bit better than they did in game 3.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, what do you think Miami, even though we had a pretty bad game 3, right? What do you think is a positive that we should carry over into game 4?
I think you still got looks from 3 that you like. Jay Crowder's not going to shoot as bad as he did in game 3. I think you had multiple chances to kind of push the Celtics in that game. So you try to take, those little things and be, okay, well, they fought, you're going to fight to the end, obviously, no matter what. That's what the Heat do. But for the most part, it was, Jimmy Butler didn't play great, until he attacked well against the small ball lineup that the Celtics had. Didn't play great before that. I feel like he hasn't even really found his groove in this series yet. So I feel like that's a positive because he can be better. I feel like Bam had a lot of great moments against the switching. So part of the Celtics switching is to take away, the dribble handoff, the ball screen game that the Heat love to run. That's been extremely effective. And so switching that action nullifies the advantage that Hero or Robinson or, Dragic can have off of that. But then that allows Bam to really, dominate and post up Hayward, roll, and kind of be that offensive force, which that's the part of the Celtic strategy, but it's also a positive for the Heat.
Got you. And Coach, I call you Coach because you have 10 years of experience as an actual head coach. That's pretty cool. You're located in Ohio. That's pretty awesome. Being a Cavs fan, are you rooting for the Lakers?
Nah, I don't root for anybody. To be honest, okay. I'm a Cavs fan, so I root for the Cavs. Right. I've grew up watching LeBron for, since my dad coached against him. He's a freshman in high school, so I've known him for a long time. But I'm not like a LeBron fan per se. Like I don't follow him wherever he goes. And the hardest part about all of this, the breakdown stuff, is you have to try to be as unbiased as possible. Which is a nightmare because everybody has tendencies that they like they like watching teams play and they not watching teams play. So for me, I just kind of right now I'm just honing in on good basketball, watching for the adjustments, trying to break it down as unbiased as possible. But we always have things that creep in. But no, I'm not really a huge LeBron fan per se. Big Cavs fan, all Ohio sports, but that's about it.
So I was watching one of your clips, and one of the things you noted was that what the Celtics were doing in that last game was they were actually switching on to Bam on purpose, and then they would pass the ball to whoever wasn't on Bam, and then they would attack that defender, right? So it usually meant it was always Duncan that they were kind of attacking. What does the Heat do, to kind of – because, you want to switch because that's what the Heat's defense is, but what do you do to to do what they're doing?
Yeah, so that's the hard part. The whole point of them switching Bam, especially onto Tatum and like Kemba, is it takes away the ball screen attack of those two players who they killed the Raptors with, and they're two of the best ball screen scorers in the NBA if you look at the numbers. So doing that, switching Bam onto them, or even they're not going to get burned on Marcus Smart or anybody like that in the ISO situation. So switching nullifies the best action that the Celtics have had, especially that double ball screen they run for Kemba all the time. But the problem is, and was a big note that other people covered really well, was pulling Bam away from the basket takes away any rim protection, and you can kind of pick on who you want to go at. So when you do drive, there's no help. So the two options are to go to typical coverage, which is I don't think they're going to do, which we have Bam in like almost drop coverage, where that's how they defended the ball screen most of the season and against the Bucks even. Is to have him, play off in the ball screen, which you don't want to do against Tatum or Kemba. The Celtics will carve that up. Or it is when the switch occurs and the Celtics do try to attack, is a switch again off the ball. Okay. I don't know. The Celtics are smart enough where they could exploit that at times. But like, let's say, the main thing they were doing, the Celtics would be to go to a dribble handoff with whoever Duncan Robinson's guarding, right? So like, let's Tatum would hand off to Smart. Smart would come off a ball screen. Bam switches on to Smart, and then they throw it back to Tatum, who's got Robinson on him. Then he attacks, one-on-one. Bam pulled away. Well, as soon as that pass happens, if the weak side defender like Crowder or whoever's on the weak side, him and Bam could switch. Now Bam can drop back down and be some rim protection. It takes a really smart, connected team to do that. Like the Warriors would do that all the time. They were one of the smartest teams the past 4 years. This Heat team reminds me a little bit of them, of how they kind of play and their vibe almost. But I don't know how effective. I mean, having 4 days off helps, but like actually putting that game plan and executing it, you can get burned easily. So it's like a risk mitigation thing for a coach. It's like, do we want to even try this? Versus, hey, we'll just have to be better and help defense, maybe not switch Duncan as much or try to counter it that way.
Okay.
Nice. And Coach, you mentioned that the Heat, I guess, remind you of the Warriors. Is it because of Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson mostly, or do you include Jay Crowder and maybe some other perimeter shooters? Yeah,
it's just the threat of the 3-point shot. Right. Pulls the defense out, and you have to kind of change your defensive philosophy to guard them. And then when they get their cutting game and the style of offense they run is not like a set it up and go into a ball screen. It's continuous movement. It's continuous flow. It's beautiful. It's hard to guard. You really have to do, we had to see the Celtics had to go to their small lineup and switch everything. That's not, I mean, NBA teams do that for sure, but Tice brings a ton of value to the Celtics. Well, you're actually taking him out of the game, and now Bam has the advantage of being a bigger Draymond Green, if you will. Okay. I don't know if he has as much impact as Draymond has right now, but like you can see the path of his progress is going towards that. It's just the vibe of how hard you have to guard every possession, where if you make one mistake, they're scoring a layup on you. They're slipping. They're hitting a three, and it just is so difficult. They present so many problems overall as from a defensive perspective.
Gotcha.
So another thing that we saw the Miami Heat do was zone defense a lot of the time, right? But this time it looks like they kind of figured it out. I don't know if we attribute that to Gordon Hayward being in the game, or that they're finally, they're playing the in and out game, right? So do you think the Heat continue to try to play zone in spots, or do you think that that's no longer going to be really a weakness of the Celtics?
I think they're going to play zone for sure. If you, from a coaching perspective, if you look at, like the numbers overall, and I've done a lot of in-depth numbers on the zone. So game one, the Heat, 12 possessions, Boston scored 1.08 points per possession, which is a good number. Game two, 30 possessions, Boston scored 0.66, which is a horrible number. Like, it was terrible in game two. But game three, they bounced back on 16 possessions at 1.12 points per possession. So, from overall, it's like, all right, the zone worked. Why didn't it work last game? The number one thing that I noted, and I did an article breakdown on this for my Coach's Cut newsletter that I do for YouTube subscribers and for different things that are extended breakdowns of that, is the high post touches was a priority for the Celtics. You could see them going more and more to that, where they went from 2 in game one to, I think, 12 in game 2, and then like 16 in game 3. And the more post touches they get, the more points they score. Now, that doesn't, it's a small sample size, so it's not like a definite factor, but the high post worked for them in game 3, and that's why they scored so well against it. So if you're the Heat, one of the counters you can do is say, okay, well, let's just pinch the high post a little more and see if we can nullify that advantage the Celtics have, and then go from there. Easier said than done, because one of the weaknesses, I watched all 400 possessions of zone that the Heat had this year, and one of the weaknesses was the high post. Like, teams get the ball in the high post, it was a nightmare. And that's every zone offense. Get the ball in the high post, you're going to score most of the time. But if the Heat can now find ways to kind of limit that and really force them to play out of the high post or not in the high post, then they'll have more success going zone.
Nice. Between the Celtics and the Heat, who are you most impressed with in this series between the first 3 games on each team?
I don't know. I'd say the Heat. I mean, just because
players. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, it's Duncan Robinson at times where he just hits shots where you're just like, that's stupid, man. Like, like he hit a shot in game 3 where he literally Jaylen Brown was like holding his shirt and he just hit it over, and then you just like, and his quick release, and you just like, and so he does awesome stuff because you just watch it, you're like, no way. Like, if anybody's ever played the game of basketball knows how ridiculous those shots are. It's insane. But I mean, you got to be impressed with Bam. For me, it's you can talk about the dribble handoff game, you can talk about his scoring, but for the most part, his relentless effort on the offensive glass and on the defensive end is just it's so impressive. Like, it's just remarkable to watch somebody who is that skilled at that size to have that motor.
It's like he's never off. He's never off.
Yeah, it's like
out jump anybody.
Yeah, it's crazy to be that physically gifted and then just continue playing at that effort. And I'm sure that's why the Heat drafted him, and we've heard stories about his work ethic coming out of Kentucky. But he's been really impressive. I've actually been really impressed with Marcus Smart. Right. Like, he takes shots where I'm like, dude, what do you do? Oh, okay, cool. And again, he's that kind of the Bam guy for the Celtics, where he gets their defense going. I mean, he makes some incredible defensive plays where you just go, and of course he makes those flops where you go, I mean, come on, man, But again, if the refs call it, he's going to keep doing it. Right. There's no incentive for him not to do it. So it's like, yeah, you want him to stop doing it, stop calling it. That's what it comes down to. But yeah, he seems to kind of pull them out of places where Celtics are struggling or the Celtics are doing something weird, and all of a sudden he just kind of brings them back. And then Dragic, I think we have to talk about Goran Dragic. He is
the unsung hero.
Yeah, I mean, I even remarked, I did the 2017 Eurobasket breakdown, and it reminded me of him in 2017 when him and Luka took that team to the gold, undefeated in that tournament. He was just in control of every offensive possession. Struggled a little bit last game because they decided to play smart on him, and if you can switch, he's not as good. But I still think he's been awesome this whole series.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, he's crazy, right? Like, and like you said, he's playing Euro basketball kind of style, which we haven't seen in a long time. He's almost all-star Goran. I would actually argue that he probably is at that level right now. He's playing all-star Goran, basketball right now.
Yeah, they're saying he's the greatest point guard in Heat history just because of the playoffs at this point. So, I mean, they got Tim Hardaway to balance that up against.
Yeah.
But if they get to the finals, Timmy never did it. Timmy never did it. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, to be fair, the lineage of Heat point guards isn't like elite status. Now, if you talk about like small forward, shooting guard, but like you're going against like Mario Chalmers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about another guy, right? Tyler Hero. That this kid has been doing has been insane, right? During the playoffs, like some of us in 5 Reasons have been comparing him, and not comparing him to say that Dwayne Wade is worse, right? We're just saying he's playing like a Dwayne Wade type rookie, right? His numbers are almost there. He's playing six few minutes than what Dwayne Wade was playing during his first year, and he's almost averaging the same thing. The only thing that's different is like the field goal percentage, but when they look at the true shooting percentage, it's pretty much the same. Right. So can you talk about what this kid is doing? What's making him so good during the playoffs? Is it that nobody's really guarding him? Nobody knows what he has to offer? Or is it just the kid's talented? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely talented for sure. I think that's evident with his play. He's got just sometimes when you watch players play, like they just have something like sometimes like I watch a lot of UFC, and sometimes fighters just have something. Like sometimes basketball players just have something like confidence, but they just have it, and you're just like, man, that, like Luka, like he just has it, and like Tyler, he has it. Hero has it. I mean, he pulling up for threes in transition, like at the end of game 1. Like, I mean, what are you doing, man? And it's just grilling him. Yeah, he's a blast to watch. He's just got this irrational confidence that is great, but also like sometimes you're like, all right, man, like relax. But like he hit some shots in that, was it the third quarter we had that run, or second quarter, where he just went on, like scored like 18 points or whatever, 15 points. Where you just like whatever shot he took, you're like, oh, that's going in. You know, like he had a shot over Marcus Smart where Marcus Smart could not have defended it any better, and it just went in. So you watch him, you're like, man, and a part of that is the Heat's handoff game. He is so good and athletic to be able to come off those handoffs, and even if you are there, he can attack downhill. And now he's finishing around the rim. I mean, he hit that the Chris Paul, the yo-yo move to Bam on the lob that one time. You're just like, man, that like rookie shouldn't be doing that, right? Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And the one thing I'll say about the whole Dwayne Wade thing is I'll just leave it at this. If Dwayne Wade was a rookie in today's age of basketball, where it's spaced and you can drive and you more offensive driven, I think his numbers would be way different, and we'd probably be talking about way differently in terms of his impact, right?
That's fair. That's fair to say. But at the same time, I mean, this kid, Tyler Hero, can you talk about real quickly? I don't know if you've noticed, how effective is it when Tyler Hero is playing point guard for this team? Because they've actually given this rookie his first year as in the playoffs, control of the offense, right? Of what's going to happen. So yeah, and in the fourth quarter, how effective have you seen that, or do you think that he's still got way too much to learn, that they should probably do less of it?
Yeah, I mean, also, whoever starts the Heat offense doesn't really have as much as an impact as it does who's finishing. Just because of the style of offense they're playing. It's not like they're going to, like, he's Chris Paul coming down, setting up, moving players around, and they go to a ball screen and he's kind of picking apart the team from that angle. It's more of like he's bringing the ball up, but once Bam touches it at the elbow, in the middle, now everybody's moving and cutting and everybody's doing different things. It may end up with him, at the end of possessions at times, sure, but it's not like, they're trying to control the game through him. So I think the impact is more about like, okay, how are we gonna, how are we gonna get into our stuff versus, he's got the ball, they're trusting him to do everything, if that makes sense. So it's not to kind of take away from what he's doing. It's just more, I think it lessens the burden of the Heat's point guard by saying you don't have to do all of this. Like you're not having to go every possession in a ball screen and trying to attack from there. Now, is he finding success with that? Yeah, sure. But at the same time, I would kind of be like, all right, well, he doesn't have to do a ton of effort from a point guard standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And Coach Spo, he's getting all the praise. He's one of the top 3 coaches. It's Pop, him, maybe Stevens. How do you think, or how do you foresee the Miami Heat winning this series?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of trying to take away, like when the Celtics go small, you're going to have a very clear intent about who you're playing against that lineup. I think some of the lineups, like he played Olynyk and Bam together, can't do that anymore. Like that's not going to work, just because if the Celtics are going smaller, now they can pick on Olynyk. Like now they have somebody they can go after, right? So you have to kind of decide, here's the rotation we're going to play when they go Hayward at the 5 or wherever you want to call it. But if they go the Celtics ultimate small ball lineup, or even with Grant Williams at the 5, who's going to be in for those moments? Like what's your rotation? What's your counter? How are you going to kind of combat that? Because you saw success against the small ball lineup, but like by that time the game was kind of already in hand. So it was like, all right, maybe the Celtics aren't trying as hard. But it's also like, so the Celtics, the best thing that they do is they have this weird ability to like not care what's going on in the sense of like they look like they're not trying half the time. So what you have to do is when they start to get in that kind of weirdness, like if you just watch Tatum and Brown at times, they're just kind of like, they'll just kind of walk around and they're so smooth that they can get away with it. Wow. But like against the Raptors, even like they just look like they didn't care the Raptors were on the court with them. Yeah, it's not like, it's just like they just have a weird like that's kind of who, and that might be who they are, right? Like, I mean, I don't know them personally. So I've played with players who like walk into a gym like 1 minute before the game with sandals on, put on their shoes and drop 45 because it just comes easy to those kind of players. And I think Tatum has some of that where he can just get a bucket whenever he feels like it. But when they start having the mental errors, that's when the Heat really have to start pushing and going forward against those type of like actions. So there'll be times where the Celtics will be up 12, be up 14, the Heat cut it to 5, but then the Celtics go right back up to 10. So it's like, just keep pressing and don't, you can't get caught that far down just because it's so difficult to come back all the time. I think Butler even said that, like, you can't keep getting down and keep coming back. That's not a winning strategy. So I think controlling the effort in those lineups, I would limit some players who, like Iguodala hasn't really been that impactful. I'd probably limit his minutes more. I don't think he played that much in game 3. He can add some value, but the Celtics were able to hide like Enes Kanter on him when he was in that lineup. Like, that can't happen. Like, you have to be able to exploit Kanter when he's on the court. You can't allow them not to hide those like Tice on Crowder. You can't allow that to happen. You've got to be able to have some sort of counter for that. And I think, using him as a ball screener, getting him in the handoff game when Tice is there, but just kind of figuring out those creative ways to exploit some of those Celtics, the big guys. You got to be able to take advantage of that if he's going to put him on Jay Crowder. That you can't let that happen. So just being able to maybe limit some of those other players, like shorten up the rotation, limit some minutes and players who aren't as impactful in game 2 or game 3 going forward, and then kind of see what happens from there.
Gotcha.
Did you think the Celtics were going to win this series before the series started?
So not famously, but anybody who talks to me about predictions, I don't make predictions, period. I don't even think about it because, number one, it makes you want to root for you to be right versus actually watching the game, right? Like, so if I pick the Celtics in 6 and they're down 2-0, I'm like, oh no, like, in my bias by saying like, oh, the Heat aren't that good or the Celtics aren't that good. Like, you just start wanting the Celtics to win four in a row, and then all of a sudden when you're looking at the game, you're not watching what the Heat are doing, what the Celtics are doing. You're watching the official made a bad call, that wasn't a travel, or, they're missing shots. And here's why, they're missing shots because the Heat are fouling or whatever. You just get into a mindset of excuses versus actually trying to watch the game and be like, okay, here's what's actually happening.
Gotcha.
So,
and I don't want to look too forward ahead, but I like 2-1 in the series. So let's say, hypothetically, Miami plays the Lakers in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like Miami's chances?
Yes and no. It's a terrible answer. I like the matchup. I think Miami can match up well. And the big thing when you play against the Lakers is LeBron and AD, right? Like, they have players they can throw at LeBron, in my opinion. I think Bam can guard LeBron. I think Iggy does a good job on LeBron. He always has. Yeah. Crowder can even give him some problems. Butler might be able to get a little physical with him. But like, the problem is who's going to guard Anthony Davis when that player's on LeBron? Right. Let's say they go to LeBron at the 5, LeBron at the 4, AD at the 5. Okay, let's say you put Bam on LeBron. Well, is Iggy going to guard Anthony Davis then? Is Bam guarding Anthony Davis and Iguodala guards LeBron? But then LeBron I just don't know if Bam's good enough to guard AD. That's the problem. Right. Yeah. And by doing that, now AD's stretching out at the 5. Now you're pulling Bam away. Now it's just kind of what we're getting into now, where Bam's away from the rim. Lakers can go into it. They put LeBron in the post. Now you got AD spacing. Bam's outside. Anthony Davis makes it a very difficult matchup. The difference is I don't think the Heat's bench will get killed by the Lakers bench. Like, the Nuggets bench right now, they played okay in game 2, but like, they get hurt because LeBron at the 5, they're putting Plumlee on him at times. Like, that's just not going to work. But the Heat have a little bit more of the depth in the small ball where they can kind of give more problems, in my opinion, to the Lakers. Nice. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you were also saying that when we have to punish the Celtics a little bit more when they play that 5-man lineup, right? So specifically, are we talking about? I would imagine Bam has to punish Hayward when he's playing the center position, right? Because that's what Celtics are usually doing in the small lineup. They're putting him at the 5.
Yeah. So the Celtics, when they go Hayward, Tatum, Brown, Kemba, and Smart, which they haven't played a ton of, so we don't know if it's going to be as sustainable as it has. We got a really small sample size with it. It actually got murdered in the regular season. They were like -83, like 25 possessions, which is insane to think about. But so when they go to that lineup, you're going to have to basically make it. There's two ways you can go about when I talked about this. When a team switches everything, there's two ways you can attack it. You can either you go at one single player, Kemba, right, and try to ISO or punish them in the post or however you're going to attack it, or you can continue your motion, get slips, make the defense make the mistake, make the onus on them, right? Because the switching, if they switch, it's taking you out of what you're trying to do. It might have Dragic, it may take him out of the series. We don't know. But the difference is you can't allow the switching to just get your offense out of what it's not used to, which is like Butler ISOs and Bam post-ups are probably the two worst plays for the Heat from an efficiency standpoint, right? But against like Hayward, or even like Tatum or Brown, if Bam's posting them up, that changes the overall efficiency and the goal, right? Because all of Bam's post-ups are not against smaller players. So when you look at the numbers, you're like, yeah, that's the worst action. So that's what the Celtics are probably thinking. But if it's against smaller players, he may have more success. So you have to make a decision as a coach. You have to decide if you're going to try to attack the weaknesses when they switch, or are you just going to kind of get into what and stay with what you're doing and make them make the defensive mistake.
Okay.
Nice. All right, so I guess we're down to our last question, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I'll make it simple. Who's the most overrated NBA player? And then I guess I would say underrated, or most that player that you think you would invest in more, because I guess like Luka would probably be that guy, or Trae Young, but most overrated, and then the next star. Okay.
So, all right. So here's the thing. You say overrated and underrated, right? Those are pretty subjective.
Okay. You're right.
So,
You're right.
So let's say you think Luka is going to be an okay player.
I want your subjective opinion.
Okay. Man, that's a good question. So I think the most underrated player is actually Anthony Davis. Okay. I don't think people actually understand like how good he changes everything on the court, like literally everything. And so I think people like he should be like he's in my opinion the MVP conversation regardless of what people actually think.
Wow.
I said this on Ben's podcast, and I'm thinking basketball. I really think people don't understand the value that he brings, and he completely nullified what the Rockets do offensively. Like, I mean, the defense system was great. Like, he just took them completely out of what they were doing. So I think he might be underrated in my opinion, because it's just what he can do every possession. Overrated? I don't know, man. I don't like the overrated conversation. See, but again, it's like, what are we rating?
Jeremy Lin.
Who's somebody that bothers you because they get so much praise, but they probably don't? Maybe Paul George, somebody that just doesn't deserve all the money.
I don't know. I'm not paying them, so I don't care. I don't know. I don't really get into the whole overrated thing. I mean, I think part of it is because I'm a coach, so like I know what goes on behind the scenes from players working, like how hard those guys work, right? So it's like, for me, I don't know. I don't think any of them are overrated because they're NBA players, first of all. So that's kind of like hard for me to decide. So it's probably not the answer you want, but
no.
All right, my last
answer on your behalf.
Yeah,
my last question is going to be on Jimmy Butler. His impact on the Heat, right? Like overall, what would you say that? And then just for a quick, just for joy for me, can you explain how wrong the 76ers were by by giving a max to Tobias Harris instead of keeping Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Jimmy Butler changed a lot because what it did, it allowed the Heat's system to be elevated with somebody who is a star player. I wouldn't say he's a superstar player necessarily right now, but having a star player that plugged nicely into what the Heat culture already did. And by all accounts, I don't know him personally. I really haven't studied who he is, but all other thing that I've seen is he's tough. He's headstrong. He works hard, and that's what the Heat are about, right? Like those are like basically the three things that are just this is what they do. So having a guy who can go get you a bucket or make a winning play and be timely in that, you can see him struggle in games, and all of a sudden he makes two huge steals for layups, and all of a sudden the Heat win. Having that combined with what the Heat already built, in the correct way and didn't tank, it just elevates their whole system and belief even more. And you can see he's giving confidence to some other players who may not have had that confidence before. And I think Spoelstra does that too. He enables those guys to kind of go and allow more freedom. Yeah. So it's like just having a guy who just walks in and fits into your system, right? And when you're a coach, you talk about alignment. That's like the whole thing with when you're either running a program or building a team, you want to have alignment, and that's philosophy, that's on court, that's off court, and so you can add a star player on that alignment, right? Like that just elevates everything, to that point. Touch on the 76ers, we won't really know the overall impact of not giving Jimmy Butler versus getting Jimmy Butler, right? Until maybe 3 or 4 years down the road. Let's say the Sixers trade Al Horford, flip 2 or 3 guys for some shooters, put shooters around Embiid and Simmons and Embiid, and all of a sudden they're in the conference finals or the finals in 2 years. I mean, that's not a mistake then, right? And now it looks bad for sure, and you can say that is it probable they're going to make? No, it's probably not. But at the same time, we won't know the true impact. And let's just call it what it is. Did Jimmy want to go back to Philly? I don't know. I mean, maybe he said, "Hey, look, I don't really want to go back, and so you can sign and trade me, but I'm out of here."
Yeah, it didn't sound like he was in love with Brett.
Coach wanted him out,
and so like that's. Do we really know what happened behind the scenes there? No. But is it a mistake now? Yes. But is it a mistake in 3 years? We won't know until it all kind of shakes out and plays out from there. So probably not what you want to hear because you want me to rag on
that's
them.
fine. That's fine.
But I'm not going to do that.
We'll get it next time. Next time we'll get it out of you.
Yeah.
But
sure.
Thanks for being on with us, Gibson Pyper, everybody. Make sure you follow him at Half Court Hoops on his Twitter, and make sure you also get on to his website, thebasketballplaybook.com. He's got a lot of good stuff. He also writes articles and breaks everything down for you. Check out his YouTube. This guy knows all his stuff.
Yeah.
If we win, which I'm hoping we will, and I think you think that we're going to win because you're a big Heat fan now. We'll try to get you on again. That way we can get a preview of the Lakers and the Heat. So thanks again for being on with us.
Or the Nuggets. They're not down 3-1 yet.
Or the Nuggets.
So thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it, man.
One more thing. Do you remember the 1997 World Series, Indians versus Marlins?
No. Doesn't ring a bell. No.
Yeah, well, Marlins came away in Game 7. And the Heat are going to do similar. They're going to do similar this series. I feel it. I just put some good omens out there. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Later, man. Thanks again.